In today's video, we're going to be revisiting the Pierre Dubois and Patrik Laine blockbuster trade that's happened here in the past couple of days. We're going to be discussing a lot of the information that's come out since the trade took place, about a lot of the drama going on behind the scenes. How much of a role do guys like Blake Wheeler on the Winnipeg side and John Tortorella on the Columbus side really have in making this deal take place and kind of driving these guys out of town? We'll discuss the articles that are referencing this information coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, I want to kind of revisit this Laine Dubois deal. Obviously, it's a blockbuster trade that's just happened here in the past couple of days. If you've been living under a rock, haven't been keeping up with the NHL news, yes, Winnipeg and Columbus pulled off a massive blockbuster trade, sending two top players in the NHL, young players at that were drafted number 2-3 not that long ago in the draft. Patrik Laine and Jack Roslovic to Columbus in exchange for Pierre Dubois in a third-round selection. So obviously both players, Laine and Dubois, had a lot of kind of drama going on behind the scenes. There was a lot of speculation, a lot of talk, a lot of rumors about why each player wanted out of their situations. They were both very unique, very different situations, and I think to some degree both players kind of left their franchises feeling a little bit differently as well. So since everything's taking place, obviously both players have conducted interviews, and to be honest, they haven't really either publicly stated much to kind of give us to go on. But there are a lot of other news articles that have been published here in the past couple of days, and I will link them in the top comment here, pinned comment in the top of the video. So if you want to check those out and kind of see where I'm getting this information, feel free to do so. There's a lot of talk and sources coming forward to different NHL news writers talking about what was going on behind the scenes, which they feel led to these things happening, and both players being unhappy and wanting a change of scenery. Now, first up, let's look at the Winnipeg side of things and Patrik Laine. Of course, we know he was a number 2 overall pick behind Austin Matthews, came into the NHL with a lot of fanfare, obviously has a big personality, a lot of goal-scoring ability, comes across as being a very laid-back, easygoing kid, as a big guy. You know, we know he loves his video games, and certainly at times during his tenure in Winnipeg, I think some people might have questioned his work ethic. They might have questioned his, his desire to work both ends of the ice and become a better player and all that. And a lot of that is because of what we saw on the ice and how he interacted with some of his teammates. But certainly, some of the articles and sources close to the Winnipeg situation are certainly referencing a little bit of a toxic locker room situation involving its leadership and Laine. So basically what they're saying is that guys like Blake Wheeler, who's the captain of the Winnipeg Jets, and even to a degree Mark Scheifele, but mostly Wheeler, basically want what they want and will do whatever they need to get it. So in the case of Laine, obviously he plays right wing, Wheeler plays right wing, and I guess many felt that maybe Wheeler was kind of trying to hold him down so that he wouldn't lose his top line spot along Scheifele. And we know Laine, for whatever reason, just will always get second line minutes, not always on the first power play. It just seemed kind of weird in how they utilized him, and that even the head coach and Paul Maurice and GM Cheveldayoff just, I guess, never felt like had the power to kind of overrule the leadership group of the players, which was kind of weird, given that, you know, they're kind of the boss in charge here. You know, you get the GM has control, be able to, replace the coach, give feedback to the coach. He's essentially his boss, and so on. It just seems like a kind of a weird situation, but ultimately, Blake Wheeler himself did do an interview and talked about the Laine trade, and he expressed some regret and some disappointment in how things were handled, and he himself even said that he wishes he might have used better communication with Laine early on. So basically talking instead of yelling, communicating better. There's often times that he was really critical and hard on Laine, and Laine is a laid-back, easygoing kid who loves hockey, but just they have different personality types. So it seemed like there was a bit of a conflict there in that, like I said, in the locker room, it just kind of got toxic given the what they kind of demand of their players, which is, it's not a bad thing per se to demand hard work ethic and, all that, but you have to draw the line with how you treat people. So whether or not any of that is true, I guess we'll probably never know 100%, but essentially, like I said, the leadership group there made things toxic for Laine. He certainly had questions about his long-term future, wanting to deal with that, and it kind of made him want a change of scenery which is ultimately how things went. I mean, as a young player coming into the NHL, you probably feel somewhat of a obligation to kind of follow the lead and deal with the team captain and the top players and all that. And it just seems like they try to keep them down rather than try to help them all move up, is kind of the impression that we're getting now. If any of that's true, to be honest, I'd be completely very disappointed. I mean, I personally really like the Winnipeg Jets as a hockey team. I find them very fun to watch. Wheeler and Scheifele especially are guys that I think they come across as being quality people. When you see them on the ice dealing with the media, they don't come across that way. But at the end of the day, how they are in the locker room and behind the scenes, we may never know. But that's how Laine appeared to feel, and after enough of that, essentially he and his agents decided that we need to have a change of scenery. We do not see a long-term fit in Winnipeg for Laine, and we want it out. So all at the same time here, that's why they did a short-term contract. And I think Cheveldayoff was known for some time he was going to have to trade him before the next contract came along, either during the 2 years or while he was an RFA this coming offseason or something to that effect. Well, Cheveldayoff knew all along that was likely coming to be for some time, is what we're hearing now. Now, on the Columbus side of things, with Pierre Dubois, it seems as though things changed relatively quick. I mean, at one point, not that long ago, Pierre Dubois apparently built a new home in Columbus. It appeared like he was going to be planning to stay there for some time. Of course, he was coming near the end of his entry-level contract and knew that a new contract was going to be coming as part of the process to remain in Columbus. But as part of the negotiations, when they first started talking, essentially what kind of set things off is he started asking questions about the team's future and the direction of the team. Before he signed a long-term commitment, he wanted to understand where GM Jarmo Kekalainen was at, and if he could get some kind of a reassurance that some of the core pieces like Seth Jones, Zach Werenski, for example, who are coming up here in the not-too-distant future for new deals, do they see them as part of the future? Do they see them as being being re-signed to long-term deals themselves? And who's going to be sticking around here with me that I can kind of fight with and try to get more success for this franchise? I couldn't help but wonder, even though it wasn't confirmed in the articles, if he also might have asked about John Tortorella, because we know he had a contentious relationship. Could he have possibly asked about the future of that position as well? I don't know. But essentially what we're led to believe is that he was not really too keen or liking too much of what the answers were, and therefore he decided that he did not want to do a long-term commitment with Columbus. They were trying to sign him, it was believed, to 2 contracts. They were either looking at 7-8 year deals, long-term, big money contracts, or they were also looking at a 4-year contract, which essentially would have walked him directly to unrestricted free agency, like we saw with Austin Matthews and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Same kind of contract, not the exact same kind of money, obviously, but same sort of scenario, so that they would lock him up for 4 years. They'd get a bit of a longer-term deal, but still they would have 4 years to kind of prove to him where the franchise is heading, and then be able to show him from there and hope that he'll sign longer after that if things are still working out for both sides. But at the end of the day, Dubois didn't want to do that. He wasn't comfortable doing that based on the answers he was given. Of course, we don't know what those answers were, but it was discussions about the future of the team is kind of what set the ball in motion for him to question whether he wanted to be there. So therefore, his agents and Jarmo Kekalainen decided that we'll do a short-term contract that will allow you to have the player under contract, which is more valuable than not being signed. We'll sign at what we consider to be a maybe slightly less value than what he'd like to get, just to make the contract more tradable, more fair and reasonable that way. And you have the term of the contract to find a trade. So essentially, it was not really kind of believed that a trade would happen immediately, that it was going to take a little bit of time here. Now, of course, we know what happened in the bubble. The Columbus Blue Jackets did surprise the Toronto Maple Leafs. We saw Pierre Dubois have a bit of a coming out party. It was a big part of that. Had a terrific playoff, really grabbed the center stage, and really showed what he was capable of. We also saw some really heated disputes on the bench with Torts, like usual. And that's the part of it I'm sure that he wasn't too pleased with. But essentially, they get through that, and that doesn't seem to be a tipping point here. However, things really changed for Dubois once the 2021 NHL season started to get underway. So what's being reported in Columbus is that essentially after all those negotiations took place, and it was believed to be private that Dubois wanted a trade, the GM knew about this, they agreed to this 2-year deal, and that he would find a trade for him before the contract was up. There wasn't a huge rush, that he could take his time and find what was best for the franchise. But clearly John Tortorella got wind of this, because once training camp opened, an odd move on Tortorella's part, apparently he had advised his assistant coaches to not even speak with Dubois. So as soon as training camp got underway, Dubois obviously knew something was up and that he must have been aware of this situation, and he was being treated differently. Then from there, it was reported that Tortorella essentially called out Dubois in front of the teammates, wanted to get it out in the open. He said this publicly, so I believe this part to be true for sure, that he wanted Dubois to explain himself to the team why he didn't want to commit to a longer-term contract and why he requested a trade, which is certainly, in my opinion, not really a great move. It's, I don't understand why Tortorella would have done this and really put the pressure on him. That's certainly it really accelerated things for sure. And then you go through the motions here, how he was treated through training camp. So it's not a wonder why, if all that is true, and it makes sense that it would be based on how he reacted at least. But like I said, we're going on hearsay. But that, ultimately, once the game started, his effort wasn't where it needed to be. Obviously, Tortorella got even more frustrated because of that. Benched him. It became a whole public, display. Got really ugly, really fast. And even though they were prepared to let this ride out and take their good old time for a trade, it took a week of NHL hockey to kind of Tortorella to embarrass him on numerous standpoints. So I think from Dubois' standpoint, he was basically kind of getting back at Tortorella by not putting the effort in and kind of forcing their hand. He's like, okay, I've had enough of this. This was supposed to be kept private. This was supposed to be a situation that was dealt with over time. And now I want out of here because of how this is being handled. That, to me, essentially, based on what the articles are saying and what they've all said publicly, when you combine it all together and kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together, to me, what makes a lot of sense. So I do think it's fair to say that John Tortorella certainly played a big role, or at least it appears he did, in Pierre-Luc Dubois wanting out of Columbus. And I think it's also fair to say that, based on these articles, that Jets leadership, on the player standpoint, kind of forced Laine to not feel comfortable there and want out. Now, it also sounds like, based on what everything had to say, that when Laine left Winnipeg, it seemed to be on better terms. I think at that point, it was kind of too little too late on how everything that had already transpired. He decided he wanted to leave and wanted to get out of there. But at the same time, it sounded like things were on better terms and he did not leave on bad terms in an ugly situation. Whereas the opposite can be said for Dubois, that things got worse and came to a head, which kind of forced this deal. And these two teams have been talking for some time. I know when we first talked about the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade rumors, and I mentioned about how there's been some speculation that the Jackets have been having trade conversations around him throughout the offseason. A lot of people were leaving comments saying, oh, this is untrue, this is a bunch of BS, he just signed a contract. I tried to tell everybody that based on everything that we were hearing, that the contract didn't really matter. It was just a way for him to get on the ice and play and make him a more tradable asset. But at the end of the day here, I know, anyways, I'm used to that. Pretty much all videos we do, there's a few people leaving comments like that, so it doesn't bother me at all. But just goes to show, at the end of the day, things don't always happen be the way they appear they do. And said GMs don't always give you their full thoughts publicly on what they're going to do for a plan. And just because you hear somebody say this or that, it doesn't mean it's the way it is. They're not going to give you their full plans publicly. That's just the way it is. When you see a player sign a contract, it doesn't mean he's never going to be traded unless he's given a full no-move clause or something to that effect. That's a little different. But in most of these scenarios, it just made him more valuable to get done. And these two teams have been talking since the draft, off and on. And Jarmo Kekalainen knew what Winnipeg was prepared to do. They had discussed Roslovic and Laine in some capacity, a deal like this to be structured similarly the way it was since the draft back, in the fall. And then, he had his opportunity to go around the league, didn't find anything better. Things came to a head with Dubois and Tortorella on the ice. He kind of forced his hand, couldn't get anything better, got together with Winnipeg, and they made it happen. It's just as simple as that. There were some other teams that were close, like we talked about, but nobody could give them a deal like the Jets could, and they solved each other's problems. And as now, I guess we'll see how it works out, if they can be, in a better situation on both sides. A lot of that's going to depend if both players end up signing longer-term contracts and sticking it out where they are. And to be completely honest, at this point, I have no reason to believe that each player is not significantly happier and will likely do a longer-term contract next time around. Stick it out, and I just hope it works for everybody so these guys can all kind of, focus more on the hockey side of things instead of the off-ice stuff. So let me know your thoughts on the situation. How much blame do you think needs to go around for these players wanting out of their cities? And just let me know your thoughts on the whole drama behind the scenes and how some of this stuff goes down in the NHL. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.